Well, I'm delighted to welcome to this the 11th in our Lunch Club series of podcasts, film director and screenwriter Mark Herman. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
I mean, I say good morning. Our listeners could be listening to this at any time of the day or night. So any time of the day or night, Mark, hello. I've just been listening to the Christians because I love them and I think you're amazing because in my research, and please tell me this is true, you wrote some lyrics for them. Is there any truth to this?
It's completely true. Yes.
Legend.
I don't know, 3 or 4 songs on the first album, on the first Christians album. Ideal World and 2 or 3 others.
Listen, before we even go any further, I'm genuflecting because Ideal World is one of my all-time favourite songs. I'm absolutely in love with it. I think the lyrics of it are great. Before you point the finger, I mean, what a way to start a song.
Well, oddly enough, I only wrote the lyrics, but I wrote them when I was at the National Film School, and the tune was originally going to be for my graduation film, and it was about football. But then we decided that's not going to work, so we changed the lyrics, and in about 20 minutes it turned into Ideal World about apartheid.
Hang on, so because you say you just wrote the lyrics, but to me it's one of the great songs with the most incredible lyrics, and it is so powerful, and it happened all in 20 minutes.
Well, it's something I was toying with at the time. I never thought I'd write lyrics for anybody, and I was busy making films at film school. So it was a sort of sideline hobby, if you like. Just these things sometimes all fall together very, very quickly without you even working very hard.
Yeah, do you find that in the creative process generally, that when things kind of flow, they almost become unstoppable?
Yeah, I mean, I would cite Brassed Off like that. You know, I mean, some scripts take months and months, even years to write, and Brassed Off was just one of those that once I started writing it, if you're going, you may as well keep going. You go through the night, and it sort of wrote itself very, very quickly. And the same with these, it's just good fun to move away from one discipline, which is screenwriting, to writing lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, is that part of your life? I mean, growing up and kind of, it just seems to me you've covered a lot of bases. Already we're only 3 minutes in, and this was something I was reflecting on when I was coming to this. You trained in animation, you've written great screenplays, you've directed films, you've now we discover also written one of the greatest songs of all time, the lyrics for it, which is honestly, I don't know. Every time you're in the pub, I think whoever meets you should be buying you a pint. Yes, Brassed Off.
Well, that's what I keep on saying. That I keep on saying it doesn't work.
yeah. Look, every time you go and just get a megaphone out, and go. I wrote Ideal World. All the drinks are on you lot because you love it. Don't you love it?
I think if you did that in York, you'd be chucked out the pub.
Listen, some great beer in York. I've got to talk to you about that as well. I'm a big fan of Timmy Taylor's. What a pint that is. And York, I want to talk to you about York as well. But look, let's you brought Brassed Off up, so let's look at that, because I remember the first time I saw that was in the Cameo Cinema in Edinburgh. I think I was working there at the time, selling popcorn, and it was a phenomenal experience. And it just felt like nothing I'd seen before. So can you just talk us through a little bit about the genesis of the idea? Because it sounds like when you wrote it, it took care of itself. But in the lead up to that...
I'd done a couple of years earlier. I'd done a film called Blame It on the Bellboy. I don't know if we're going to talk about that.
We certainly
Dudley Moore film.
Dudley Moore. I mean, extraordinary scenes.
And that wasn't a success, and it was quite hard to get the next film off the ground. And the advice from my agent at the time was I wrote a couple of things that I thought were commercial, but nobody would touch me with a barge pole then. And the advice from the agent was to just go and write something you care about rather than what you think is going to be a success. And then that took about a year to try and find something that I cared about. And just by accident, I was driving through the South Yorkshire Grimesthorpe area, which I used to sell bacon in as a bacon salesman. and the area that I used to know then had changed so much, and this was the result of the pit closures.
Yeah.
And I felt I should write a story about it, but even then it was a long time before I attached the brass band element to it and all those hooks that came with that story. I mean, the original story is a pretty depressing story, but it's dressed up as something else, which is why it worked, I think.
I think there's a lot to that, and it's, the colliery band side of it was just brilliant, because tonally it lends an extraordinary backdrop. It gave a bit of structure as well. It links the characters. Ewan McGregor does an absolutely sterling job. It just, by the by, I think it's a great soundtrack.
And I think one of the reasons it worked is that I think people who went there expecting a comedy got something of a bonus in the politics of it, and vice versa. If people wanted to listen to the politics, they got the comedy as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think and it was a very slow running. It sort of snowballed. It was a very slow opening, and then it gathered momentum, word of mouth.
Is that right? So at the time you were thinking, it's get up, but then it did become very big, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, on Blame It on the Bellboy in America, I think they gave it about three nights before they closed it down. And Brastoff first weekend, I think, was very poor, and I think we had this sort of phone call about Film 4 were wondering whether to give it another week or not, And when you've spent 2 years or something, that's a worrying time. But very bravely, they gave it another week or so, and it actually, in the following midweek, when it would normally be dropping off, it was actually gaining audiences. Yeah. And then it really snowballed.
I think that's something that it's so important. That it's easy to forget that telly as well. Series do take time to bed in. And the temptation to just judge it and say, "Oh, that's quite worked," is ludicrously strong. I think that's to be resisted at all costs, especially as you say, you spent years making it. I mean, these days, I wonder if the influence of social media would mean that you got a swifter word of mouth response, or whether it might, it might favour a different production. It's a tough one to be able to say. But when was the moment with Brassed Off when you knew that you had a complete slam dunk hit?
Well, I suppose the biggest test audience was probably we did a nice. The first time it was ever shown, I think, was in a cinema in Barnsley, and I thought if they didn't like it in Barnsley, we've had it. Yeah. And it was an evening that was sponsored by John Smith's, and within like 10 minutes of the film starting, people were walking out, and I thought we've had it, but then we realised they were coming back in, and they just been to the toilets.
Yeah.
So it's a constant flow of people, but it's at the end there was a sort of standing ovation, and you thought, well, at least we passed this first test of getting it shown in Yorkshire. And then when it came out, I remember somebody rang me up from a cinema in London, in Fulham, and you could hear people clapping at the end of a afternoon screening in Fulham. So that was quite a moment.
It's huge, isn't it? And especially because it's so you. I mean, screenplay and your directing, it's your neck on the block, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's just talk about the process of directing your own screenplay. How do you find that? I mean, do you find inevitably you're tinkering on set, or do you find that you're pretty true to the screenplay? Or
I notice the difference between what I write and what I read of other writers.
Yeah.
And that there seems to be a leaning on other writers to sort of give the director a tip as to how to shoot it, which is not always helpful. But when I'm writing for myself, I'm sort of already seeing the film in my mind.
Right.
So I can see a scene, but I'm not writing it as a direction. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And so you've got your own shorthand as to what is shootable. Actually, this relates to a question I had in from a Lunch Club member, Anthony Ford, who wants to know, as a writer-director, does Mark the writer ever annoy Mark the director by creating on paper scenes that are extraordinarily challenging to shoot, or does Mark the director constantly look over Mark the writer's shoulder and restrain his creativity to prevent him from doing so?
Well, if it's the Anthony Ford I know, he probably knows the answer already. Yeah. I think what I've noticed, there have been times when there was a project I was writing for myself to direct. I won't name it, but I then moved on to a different project. So then had to write the next draft of that one for somebody else to direct. And I wrote it in a completely different way. Started setting scenes at sea, which are difficult to shoot, and make it more difficult for the director, which is just a nasty thing to do, I suppose. But I think when I'm writing for myself, writing for my own film, I'm writing it, I suppose, hopefully as a more pleasurable read for financiers and actors alike. So it's aimed at them rather than the practicalities of filmmaking. Right.
So the side of getting things going, I'm interested. Just looping back to Brassed Off, because you'd not had the brilliant success with Bellboy. How on earth did you manage to write and direct Brassed Off? I mean, that's only 4 years later. That's extraordinary.
It was a very quick process. It was the only place. I mean, we went round. Steve Abbott was attached, who did Fish Called Wanderer and actually produced Blame It on the Bellboy as well. And we got on very well. And so it's his baby as well. And we went round. We had this script that I'd written, and we went round, I suppose, pretty much everywhere you could in Britain to get the money. And our only success was Film 4. This was actually based on the treatment more than anything else. And I went away and wrote the script, and it became much more expensive, mainly because of music and the amount of people in the band. And it sort of doubled its budget. So we had to find the same amount again, and the only place we could find it was in America. That nice Mr. Weinstein.
So once he came on board, it was fairly.
The fear was that he would want to change the nature of the film, but he never did. And despite everything about him, he was pretty straight on that film, and just enabled us to make it the way we wanted to make it.
I've got a follow-up from Anthony here. I'm glad you know him. He says, "When the hell are you going to make another film? It's been too long."
Well, I've been trying, actually. It's not an easy time to get films made. I think the sort of films I make of that sort of mid-budget, it's quite hard to get them off the ground now. It's either sort of blockbusters or micro-budget. And the last film I made was The Boy in Striped Pyjamas, and that's over a decade ago. But I have been writing and trying to get things off the ground.
So are you concentrating on, again, sort of stories that we would expect maybe from you? Are they Yorkshire themed, or is it a range of different projects? Are you able to?
Well, I'm now doing a film about Spike Milligan.
Oh, brilliant!
Not all out comedy, I have to say. And also another project which is Yorkshire based, which we're trying to find the money for.
So, any luck? Any bites? Any joy?
It's frustrating because to me it's like Brassed Off. It's very like Brassed Off in that it's a local subject, but it would appeal to to a global audience, which is we didn't expect it really with Brassed Off. We expected it to hopefully do well in the Barnsley region, but it went to it was a worldwide hit, and I think the same would apply to this subject. I don't really want to talk about it too much because we are sort of.
Fair enough. I've got a Yorkshire-based question actually from Doris Spriggs, who says, "My family are from Yorkshire, so I really identify with the characters in Brassed Off and Little Boys. How easy was it to sell those subjects to the money?"
I suppose we were getting onto that with the Brassed Off. Yes, so getting Brassed off the ground was. I wrote a treatment, but I thought you can't read this treatment without listening to brass band music at the same time to get the feel of what we wanted to make. I hated brass band music at the time.
And praising the soundtrack. I've got the CD, Mark. I love it.
Well, no, I love it. I love it now. Yeah. But then I was frightened of being spotted in the brass band section of the local record store. But I did that. I bought what I would call the real stuff instead of the Terry Wogan stuff, and played it incessantly and very loud while I was writing the script. And I made a tape. It was a tape in those days, and sent it down with the script to Film 4, so that with an instruction they had to have this on while they're reading. there are certain music cues that and tunes that they should have on while they're reading certain scene. And then I got called down for a meeting, and when the lift doors opened at Film 4, I could hear this music being played from way over there, and that's the first time I thought, right, we're going to make a film.
Yeah, they're taking you seriously. Yeah. Do you play any instruments yourself, actually?
No, I played the recorder when I was about 8.
Yeah, I think
very badly.
Yeah, I think I was a sinful recorder player as well. It was dreadful. Terry Bamber would like to know to what extent you're open to reading scripts that are already part developed, or would you only concentrate on your own story?
No, I read. I get sent a lot of stuff, and I read a lot of stuff. No, absolutely.
And you ever
what I don't like, what happens, and one thing I don't like about the industry, really, the way people think, is that if you made a brass band film, the next film you want to make is a brass band film. It's not true.
Yeah.
I make a Holocaust film, all I get sent is Holocaust scripts. Just at the time when you want to move away from what you last did.
Yeah. And I would do want to talk about The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, because the extraordinary success of it. And I'd love to talk about working with John Boyne actually as well. How did that talk us through how you went from discovering the book to deciding, I'm going to make this into a screenplay?
I got sent a galley copy of the book before it came out. John Boyne is with the same ages as I am, so I was fortunate enough to get sent this early on. And although I did think the world probably didn't need another Holocaust film straight away, I did think there was something very special about it, because it's not just the same story. It's told through children's eyes, and that actually appealed to me a lot. And I thought, I can't remember the history of this. I met up with John Boyne in Leeds in a pub, and we had lunch, and a book at that stage would normally get gobbled up by a studio if it was going to be made into a film, and I noticed that hadn't happened. The rights hadn't gone, so I took this punt, and I bought the rights myself. So at least I could have it for 2 years and write on my own without reporting to anybody.
Yeah,
it was a very pleasurable writing experience, writing without anybody telling you how to write.
Yeah.
So I'll have written maybe 2 or 3 drafts, and then decided let's go try and get this made. And really, there was only one studio I thought would touch it, and that was Miramax at the time, the new Miramax. And that's the way it happened. Daniel Batsek at Miramax backed it.
Yeah, we've had him on the podcast.
Yeah.
So working with children, that strikes me as being, especially around that subject area, directing. What sort of skill set did you have to bring to that? But also logistically, did you find there were restrictions on, literally how much time you could have them on set and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. It destroys the whole schedule. Two kids, one of which, Asa Butterfield, who plays Bruno, is pretty much in every scene. So the schedule is a nightmare to prepare, because as soon as you start shooting, he's got to go away and learn his geography or eat his lunch, or they can only really be on set for a couple of hours. And all those scenes when there's the 2 kids at the fence, very rarely were they both there at the same time. You only the 2 shots when you can see both in the shot. That's the only time they were together. Otherwise, they had to be educated or fed. So half of those scenes, they're acting against either a grown-up off screen or a piece of wood. Yeah. The kind of thing that grown-up actors object to, but those kids were just brilliant at it.
And how hard did you find it directing to elicit the performance you wanted from?
It was made difficult, really, because Asa Butterfield, who's playing the German kid, was quite laid back, and got to forget his name. The other guy, the guy who played Shmuel, he was bouncing around all the time. So it was a strange situation, considering the subject matter of the film, that we had to sort of to overfeed them in chocolate or underfeed them to bring them up or bring them down in a way. But it's a fantastic woman called Celia Bannerman who sort of set the kids up before every take, every scene, and would sort of rehearse them in a way and get them prepared before they went on set. And in a way that my memory's not very good, but I think what we did was we didn't tell them too much about they didn't really read they read the script gradually as we were going through it. I mean, we shot the horrible final scenes on the final day, and that was scheduled for a reason. And so they were finding out more about the story and the subject matter as we went along.
So the atmosphere on set presumably is getting heavier and heavier as you go.
Yeah, well, actually, the heads of department, myself and the heads of department, have all done so much research on the build-up to the shoot that we were all pretty depressed when we arrived. So it was actually quite a fun shoot, extraordinary enough.
Yeah, that is intriguing.
I remember Spielberg saying that he allowed one joke a day on Schindler's List, but that wouldn't see us past breakfast.
I suppose it's a way of dealing with it, isn't it? Because it is the most extraordinary, horrendous,
and especially with the kids, you had to keep those kids up all the time. It's it was actually a really fun shoot.
And so after you've locked it down, it's been edited and it's going to be released again. Was it an immediate moment that you knew this was going to be huge?
No, I always knew we were going to get some criticism. The difficult thing with Boyne and the Striped Pajamas was putting it up there as a fable rather than some people seem to think it's a documentary, but it's a push the fact that it's a fable. I just thought if one kid sort of fell in love with that story, that was enough, you know. If they wanted to learn more about the Holocaust just by seeing that film and being emotionally engaged in the subject, that was good enough.
Yeah, I mean.
But there was on the release. I mean, after we'd finished cutting it, or I thought we'd finished cutting it, it went on for months. Where in New York they wouldn't. They would normally test screen these films. They just didn't. For some reason, they lost the nerve somehow, and they didn't test screen it when we'd finished. So we spent a lot of time arguing about what the ending of the film should be and all that kind of thing. And then we finally had a test screening in New York, and they're all looking for the the important question on those test screenings is what's your favourite scene or what's your least favourite scene. And in a way, I felt they were looking for the audience to say their least favourite scene was the ending of the film, which they all did. But then at this focus group at the end of the film, they all put their hands up and said that was the least favourite scene. And I thought Miramax was ever going to change it. But then one hand stayed up and said, "Oh, I also put it down as my most favourite scene." And then the whole group agreed with him, and they all say it's the least and worst favourite scene. So it remained in the film. But there was a pressure to change the end of the film. So that became a sort of long struggle and put me off filmmaking for a while.
How long did you stay away?
Well, I haven't made a film since.
But I mean, more in your sense of yourself when in any career, there's moments of ups and downs and can't be bothered.
Yeah, there are, but it was no longer fun making films. If you're just sitting in a cutting room in London for months while you live in the north, you're staying in London all week and you're not cutting a film, you're just waiting for the phone call to discuss it. And it goes on too long now. That's no longer filmmaking. That's just being irritated.
Yeah, I get that, and I think the just going. I mean, the two things we've just talked. We started off with talking about apartheid. Just talked about the Holocaust. I think. Would you say that throughout your life, your touchstones are always those? They're horrendous human tragedies.
Yeah, there's no sort of passion about those subjects, but I mean, I enjoy more than anything. I enjoy writing the mixture of tragedy and comedy together. So even in a big subject like the Holocaust, I do enjoy those sort of scenes in the family where there's the occasional comic moment or a wry moment. Same in Brass Stuff, which is a different level of tragedy, obviously, but there's humour within that, and it's life is tears and laughter, and I like playing with that as a balance when I'm writing.
Yeah, I mean you're right. Life's never one thing or the other. It's a massive mixture. I mean, Little Voice as well. There's that sense of tenderness, and Jane Horrocks relating to her father's memory by those singers. That's another. It's there's a tenderness to the situation, right?
Yeah, I mean that's an adaptation as well. I mean, so most of my films have been adaptations since Brass Stuff, and there was I think Little Voice is a pretty tricky adaptation to lift it from the stage to put it on the screen. In the end, that was a Harvey Weinstein project. I remember before I was involved, when it first appeared on stage with Jane, and I went with, again, Steve Abbott, producer, not of Little Voice, but of Brass Off. But I think he'd been asked, would it make a movie? And he asked me to come along with him and see. So it was the first or second night of Little Voice on stage, and I thought that's impossible. Nobody can make that into a film. And then about 2 years later, I was asked. I said, "Oh, it's absolutely entirely possible."
Is that your very first? Yes. I've been thinking about this for 2 years. I'm totally on board. Yeah, brilliant. But
it was that thing about. I mean, I'm not a theatre fan. I don't particularly enjoy theatre, but that show, watching or not watching Jane Horrocks, because you're in the pitch black in the theatre, listening to those voices. That was so magical. I just thought that's not something you could lift onto the screen, because an audience is so clued up into what tricks you do in the cinema. So to convince audiences that this is actually Jane Horrocks doing these impressions was quite a stretch.
Yeah, no, that is, yes. Yeah. So the development process, I mean, how long did you spend teasing it out from the adaptation from theatre to screenplay?
I don't know, probably about 6 months, something like that. I mean, the stage play was set in Rochdale, in Lancashire, and it's Jim Cartwright's stage play. Very much, it feels like a Lancashire story. The way, the language and everything is absolutely that. And we were looking around locations at that stage. We ventured over to Yorkshire, to Bradford, and places like that, and that's when I got a phone call from Michael Caine, saying he wants to be in it. And I just couldn't imagine him, playing that part of Ray Say as it was written. And he says, Michael Caine said, "Well, I can do Coronation Street accent." So he did a Coronation Street accent on the phone to me, and I said, "I think we'll keep looking."
No, you didn't. You didn't say that to Mike. You can't say that to Michael Caine.
Michael Caine said, "You'll make a great film. You're going to make a great film without me, without me. But if you have me in it, it'll be even greater." I can't do the Michael Caine voice, but that's what he said.
Good line.
And I thought he just wasn't right. Because Pete Postlethwaite had been played that part on the stage, and that gets lodged into your head, a performance like that. And I just couldn't see Michael Caine playing a talent agent in Rochdale. I just couldn't buy it. And after that phone call, I rang some friends and I said, "What do you think about Michael Caine?" And they said, "Absolutely not. Completely wrong." And then 3 or 4 of them rang back after about 20 minutes and said, "Actually, you should think about it." And I had exactly the same train of thought. I said, "Actually, It's Michael Caine.
It is Michael Caine. This is exactly it. I'm amazed you held on for so long.
So after that, I just rewrote it. I said, we've got to find a new, we've got to set it somewhere else. It can't be Rochdale. It has to be some sort of seaside entertainment town where, Michael Caine has to play a Londoner, basically. And you can believe a Londoner being washed up further and further north. So that's why we ended up in, it was either going to be a Blackpool or a Scarborough, or, but he had to stay with the Michael Caine voice. You can't have Michael Caine with an accent. So I completely rewrote the script to base it on this in a seaside town.
And working with him, I mean, that must have been quite an experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit surreal, really. Because I was born in Bridlington, which is 10 miles from Scarborough. So those evenings of sitting in a Cadillac with Michael Caine on the harbour at Scarborough, chatting, was just like such a surreal moment. Yeah. But he was great to work with. But on the first day, he's checking everybody out. I spot him behind some sort of curtain somewhere, and he's just watching everybody to see if they're up to the job. So it's quite testing. And it's interesting in that film because you've got a mix of movie people and stage people. So you got Michael Caine and Ewan McGregor, film people, and Brenda and Jane, brought up in the theatre. And there were scenes between Brenda and Michael where Michael's only one take. He just wants one take time, whereas Brenda might take 5 or 6 to get going. So that kind of thing is quite tricky.
So how do you manage that when you direct?
Whatever Michael Caine wants.
Do you know what? That's not a bad motto for life, is it? Whatever Mr. Caine would like. Did you ever persuade?
Well, I suppose you got to I suppose just be polite and not get on any of his nerves and just try and work it out.
See, I'm always intrigued by that because I've worked on sets with people who are pretty brutal, but equally people who are very genial. It doesn't seem to be a hard and fast rule. There just seems to be people who remain friends and people who don't.
Yeah, I just kind of, I've been on a few sets before I started directing, really, and I won't name them, but you just think, why be an arsehole? What do you gain by this behaviour, And such wood, all the shoots I've been on, they've all been fairly happy. And it's that thing about filmmaking is the whole crew together. Yeah. I have to say that, but it is that you employ people because they're great at their job, and you seek their advice. Even as a director, you're not the king. You just ask them what do they think and what would work, and that's why you choose them. Same with casting.
So in terms of casting, I've got a question from a final lunch club person actually from Charlie McFarlane, who wants to know: are there any actors working today who you'd love to collaborate?
By collaborate, you mean employ?
Yeah, I guess. Although yes, I would say. I'm not sure.
So I've just been singing the praises of collaboration, but I'm not sure I want to sit down and collaborate with an actor and I don't know. It's such my mood on actors sort of changes every week, but it's difficult to name people when you're on a podcast, and I'm not going to answer the question.
Fair play, you don't have to. It's totally cool.
Yeah.
What about? I kind of want to just wrap up by trying to drill down into a sort of can you set the scene for us for a typical working day for you as a screenwriter? Because I can imagine on set, you turn up marshalling, your resources, but screenwriting is such a solitary pursuit, and it is extraordinary to conjure something out of the ether, and then it results in the employment and the entertainment and the enthrallment of so many people. How does that feel in that moment? Are you just blank page, right? I'm writing for me. I'm going to do this morning. And do you have a routine as well? Have you got a little shack you write in, or are you writing at your desk, or have you got a lucky coffee cup? All of that stuff.
I've got a desktop. I've got a sort of study at the end of the house, locked off from the rest of the house, in which I don't do any work, really, most of the time. It's the process. I don't know. Recently I find myself sort of deleting I'll get up and have a cup of coffee, and I'll delete more than I wrote yesterday. So most of my work is deleting. People ask me about sort of teaching screenwriting and all that, and I can never string a sentence together on the process of writing. If somebody could put a camera on my shoulder and see what was happening on my screen while I was editing a screenplay or working on a screenplay, then I could explain it at every stage, every minute, why I'm moving that to there and this to over there and deleting this and putting this. You could explain it at the moment, but it's very hard to sort of sit in front of a class of students and try and explain it. I find that very difficult. But when it works, when it gets going, it takes off. It just, like I said before, it just does take off. But there's nothing worse than block. The other side of it. And in all writing and directing, my favourite moments, including shooting scenes that really work well, my favourite moments are when a script problem is solved, or you suddenly crack something on a script. And the sad thing is that you're sitting on your own doing it, and there's nobody to celebrate with.
Just air pumping and listening to brass band music. Yes.
Yeah.
Look, Mark, thank you so much. I'm conscious I've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you very much for joining us on the Lunch Club podcast. And
I'm only sorry I'm not there for get the free lunch.
You know what? You're always welcome for the free lunch. Lunch Club, the doors are open to you, and the world's arms are open to you, not just for your wonderful work in film, but also for the ideal world.
Well, you're very flattering.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, cheers.